Cover One, the NFL Draft Podcast, is back for episode 57. I am Russell Brown, and alongside me, as always, Brad Kelly. We've got an action-packed, filled episode with interviews regarding the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Minnesota Vikings. We'll have Zach Goodall joining us to talk the Jaguars and Myles Gorham to talk the Minnesota Vikings. But before I get into that, I want to talk to you guys about Cover One, the brand new app. You need to go to your app store on your iPhone device, your smartphone device, or Google Play, whatever it is that you have. You search Cover One, and it's simple. All you do is click download, and then all the fresh new content is right there at the palm of your hands. You get scouting reports, film analysis, mock drafts, and everything else, including the podcast, all right there at your fingertips. All you have to do, go to your App Store, Google Play, search Cover One, and download it today, and stay up to date with everything Cover One. And joining us now, Zach Goodall. Zach, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Really appreciate you guys bringing me on.
Yeah, no, appreciate you joining us. We've got you out to talk Jaguars because you are the manager, the host of Locked On Jaguars, also a contributor at Big Cat Country. So you've got, pretty much everything Jaguars related. You're the guy for it. So always good content. Make sure you follow Zach on Twitter. We want to talk with you regarding the 29th overall pick and 61 and really the Jaguars as a whole, some of their needs and everything else. Very talented defense. I do want to start, though, with kind of the center position, interior offensive line. I know you guys signed Andrew Norwell, but what are your thoughts as far as Brandon Linder and A.J. Cannon? Is there any potential replacements for them, or are they pretty much kind of your starting center and right guard?
Linder will be locked in for a while. They're really happy with how he's turned out despite having a couple of injury issues in the past. Some of them have been nagging. It's something that people worry about. But when he's on the field, he's relatively dominant from what we've been able to pick up. I think he had one of the better grades in terms of centers from PFF. I don't know. I don't keep up with their grades as much as the pressure stats and all the really in-depth stuff. A.J. Cann, I'd say, is probably the weakest link on the offensive line. The idea is that despite whether people agree with it or not, and I'm not necessarily the greatest proponent of it, but they do want to run the ball so much to where Blake Bortles will throw the ball a couple of times a game max, in which case I do think they're going to try and replace Cann at right guard or at least get someone in there to compete with him. I think that'll be before day two is over. They'll have a new right guard in-house to compete, whether that be a guy that they like out of Oregon, Tyrell Crosby, who's currently – he's played left tackle and right tackle, but I think they like the idea of him short-term at guard. Or, if Will Hernandez dropped to 29, I don't know how you can't take him at that point. I do think they'll look there along the interior. Then really, when you're looking at that, you've got Cam Robinson going into his second year with Norwell, the new face of the offensive line that everyone was dreaming about Norwell around here because we all knew the interior was going to be an issue going forward if they wanted to be able to open up the middle of the line and be able to get Fournette to be effective in the tackle box. They needed to get some just interior help as much as they could, and everyone kind of dreamed of Norwell thinking, he'd be, that'd be fantastic. They kind of settled on the idea of it being Justin Pugh with the Doug Marrone, the Tom Coughlin connections. Everyone just kind of assumed that'd be the natural go. Then it's 3 a.m. and we're all getting ESPN notifications and holy hell, Andrew Norwell is going to be a Jag. This is great. So they've got the left side short up. They've got Linder then at center. I'd assume there will be a new right guard in house, whether it be at 29 or 61, and then Jeremy Parnell, he had a much better year last year than he did the year before. He had some injuries in 2016 that kind of hampered his play. I think he's still kind of short-term at this point. I think he's almost 32, so they might also draft a developmental tackle at some point. But I think the offensive line will still be something that they're going into the draft thinking they need to still continue to upgrade.
Looking at other positions on the offense, they used a high pick on Leonard Fournette last year, but this past season they lost, or this offseason they lost Allen Robinson, who they did not have during most of the season because of injury. They lost Allen Hurns, but they did pick up Dante Moncrief. Does that push the need for wide receiver up, in your opinion, in this draft? And who are some guys that they can look at throughout the first 2 days at the wide receiver position?
I'm really curious to see how they handle wide receiver at this point, because if this whole run first philosophy and run second, third, and pretty much all you can, if that's what they want to hold true to, I don't know if they'll prioritize wide receiver. And you look at that depth chart and you see, Keelan Cole, who, despite playing like a stud at points last year, like he is what he is. He was an undrafted guy. You're still developing him. You're still trying to work on his route tree, because I was at training camp and I remember watching him run routes, and the only thing he could run at the point was a 9. So he wasn't able to provide much else, but he grew throughout his year. D.D. Westbrook, he missed the first 8 games of the year, but they're growing him into kind of a possession role, kind of, I think, what they envisioned with Allen Hurns. And then they let him go because of the cap hit. They figured they've got a young guy in D.D. who's a lot quicker. They can try and work him into that role. Moncrief was kind of a flyer at a somewhat expensive price tag, but on a 1-year type of prove-it deal. I think he's going to be the closest thing to Allen Robinson that they want in terms of the ability to kind of play a 50-50 ball, because they really don't want to have Blake throwing those 50-50 balls. They want him to throw safe balls, move the ball, kind of West Coast type of style offense whenever they are throwing the ball. But I guess that was what they figured the closest thing to Allen would be. Why you don't just pay Allen Robinson a couple more $1 million at that point, I don't really know. But this is what they're doing, so I'm just going to, I guess, try and buy into it as much as I can. But I'm hopeful that Moncrief, if he can stay healthy, his injuries in the past, there have been several of them, but what's nice is that they don't all seem to be nagging. They all seem to be different things. So if he's just soft, then we signed a soft player and we got to see where we can go. But hopefully he can be healthy and contribute. And Marquise Lee is going to be used on a lot of shallow routes. So they've got a decent plan for all of these guys, but really I think the idea is to have a bunch of possession guys that aren't too expensive compared to the rest of the wide receiver market. Try not to spend too high on a receiver, but if they were to go after someone, you've seen the links of DJ Moore because he was recruited at Maryland by now Jaguars receiver coach, former Jaguars great receiver Keenan McCardell, the Cortland Sutton, a guy like him, or even if it's a tight end that can play kind of like Cortland Sutton and be such a competitive athlete going up and making these acrobatic catches, and you can just rely on him coming down with the ball more so than not. I think that'd be a great fit. Guys that are as dynamic as Sutton or, polished kind of like DJ Moore. Like I like the fits of those guys. I'm just really curious as to whether or not the team values the position enough to go early on one.
You mentioned, dumping the ball down, getting the ball out of Bortles' hands quickly. Obviously, they signed Austin Seferian-Jenkins. They bring in Niles Paul. Do you think going after a tight end is something that they do in this draft? I mean, Paul and Seferian-Jenkins, guys that sometimes just throughout their career can't stay on the field, have dealt with injuries. So do you think there's a tight end later in this draft that they might target?
I do think so. I actually think that's a potential pick earlier on. I know they've had Hayden Hurston a couple times. Local guy. His dad is I think he's the dean at the same high school that Tim Tebow played at in Jacksonville. So he's a local guy. He graduated from Bowles High School around here, big football school. I know that I've talked to a couple of people that kind of track visits with teams and where they're going. And a guy that I talked to told me that the Jags pretty much could have rented an apartment at Penn State. That's how much they were there to see Mike Gesicki. And with it being such a run-heavy offense, you'd figure that it would be they'd look for a tight end that could block a little bit better than a guy who really has no idea how to block. But that might be a way that they could feel they could replace Allen Robinson's skill set as like a big-time playmaker, and at the same time fill him in to replace Allen Hurns in terms of where they're lining them up. And I'm thinking kind of a big slot position if they go Gesicki. That's something I feel like could be in play at 29 if they decide that the value isn't there for an offensive lineman. They might want to wait until 61. Otherwise, a guy like Hurst, I don't know if they've had Goddard in at all for visits, but I think they will draft a tight end. Like you said, Niles Paul and ASJ have both had some injuries, and ASJ had previous off-the-field concerns, which I'd like to think a thing of the past, and he seems like kind of a changed man, but he's on a short-term, not too expensive deal, so they might try and develop a tight end as well. I think that's certainly a possibility.
Switching gears to the defensive side of the ball, the Jaguars defense obviously made huge strides in this past season, especially in the front seven, just full of talent. You look at the defensive line, and they go like 6 or 7 bodies, of talent deep. They have speed at linebacker with Myles Jack and Telvin Smith. But Paul Posluszny did retired, right? Yeah. So could they be looking at a replacement middle linebacker, kind of like a an old school stuff to run type of player to go along with the speed that they have in their younger linebackers. And looking at the secondary, could they be looking at maybe like a depth corner or maybe a slot specialist when they have Bouye and Ramsey on the outside?
I'm really curious about that because from what I'm thinking is that they're going to try and move Jack to the full-time middle linebacker role, which when he was playing that in nickel situations, he looked pretty good last year. So I'd like to see him grow as the full-time middle linebacker. But if they do that and then they go linebacker high, which I think could be type of a sleeper pick, last year they ran, I think, a 70% nickel package, 30% base with an under Sam linebacker kind of setting the edge against the run, not having too valuable of a role. But I feel like the opportunity for them, because they lost Aaron Colvin, a guy they really, really trusted to fill down that nickel spot, and they replaced him with DJ Hayden, and I'm not too optimistic about that, nor his contract, but that's besides the point. I think the idea of maybe trying to increase the role of that Sam linebacker in their scheme could be something they might look to do late day 2, early day 3. I think a solid fit for it would be a guy like Shaquem Griffin, and I'm a UCF fan. I would love nothing more than to see him here, but I feel like that could be because they still wouldn't be giving him more than maybe 50% of the snaps. He'd be getting in on a lot of base downs, being able to play against the run, penetrate the backfield, because that's what they tried to get out of their Sam linebacker whenever he was on the field. And in terms of the secondary, I do think that, you look at Jalen Ramsey and AJ Bouye and you think, wow, there's no weakness there in that cornerback tandem, but you look behind them and it's like kind of an abyss just of absolutely nothing. So if one of them were to go down, I do think they need a guy that can develop into a solid, plug him in if someone gets hurt or just, split reps a little bit. If these guys are getting tired, don't play him the whole game, get some fresh legs in there. Like I said, I'm not too big of a fan of DJ Hayden. I view guys in the third round, kind of like MJ Stewart, Duke Dawson, as solid fits into this cover 3 scheme. They run a majority cover 3 where they've got the nickel playing the flats and coming up against the run a little bit if they're playing nickel on base downs, in which case I think Dawson's a relatively good fit because he can play the run. He's physical. He's not the greatest in coverage, but he can be sticky. He can play the ball. I would have rather than just say, hey, we're dedicating second or third round pick to a nickel corner that we can fill in relatively easily and really cheap compared to what they're paying Hayden. But I think that the opportunity to go after a developmental nickel corner is still there because I do think they have an out in Hayden's contract after the first year. So we'll just kind of see how that plays along. But I do think both positions, linebacker and corner, will be addressed. I'm just really curious as to where.
Absolutely. I think, getting a corner is definitely something that they need to do. Linebacker is an interesting fit as well. Like you said, though, where do they take it? It's going to be interesting. I want to shift the focus back over to the offense, and this is really my last question. As far as quarterback goes, they've got Blake Bortles, they've got Cody Kessler. Do they add a quarterback to the room in this draft?
Woo! Yeah, Blake Bortles and Cody Kessler is my QB room. I'm very excited about that. See, I do think with the whole run first and second and all the time philosophy that they can make it work as long as they really do rebuild this interior, in which case if you're keeping the ball out of Blake's hands, that's great. If I'm an NFL GM and I'm realizing that I need to run the ball on 60+% of plays in this passing league that we're in right now, I'm trying to upgrade my quarterback. I would have done it last year with Watson over Fournette, even though I do think Fournette's got the ability to be a really great running back. The quarterback lifts the offense. I would have taken Watson in a heartbeat. If I were them, I would have seriously considered looking into Kirk Cousins or maybe trying to package some picks together and trade up for a guy like a Baker Mayfield or a Josh Rosen or something like that. But I'm no GM. I'm sitting here with Blake Bortles as my QB. So I do know that they met with Mason Rudolph at the Senior Bowl and Combine. I think they sent him out to their scouts out to 4 of his games, and the interest is there. I think it's because he's a Parcells type of quarterback. He checks off all those boxes, senior, played in 130 games. I don't have it all down by heart. But even though, he's not the highly coveted quarterback of this class, he does have the weak arm. He's not hitting all those outside routes. But I do think he's a fit in what they're trying to do with running the ball so much, even if that's just what they want to do regardless of Blake being the QB. make simple throws across the middle and being able to stay poised in the pocket and not try and panic too much is something that they want out of a guy. So I see the fit there. I don't think QB's in play at 29 whatsoever. If Rudolph's there in the middle of the second, I could see them trading up maybe to have their developmental backup because Bortles is technically on a short-term deal. I think they have an out after 2 years. If not, you start looking day 3 at, the tiers and tiers below the consensus, like seemingly top 4 or 5 QBs here. But the Chase Littons, the Mike Whites, the Kyle Lauletta, if he somehow fell past the second round, which I have no clue if that'll happen or not, or late round guys like the Logan Woodsides of the draft. I do think they'll look into, and maybe it'll just be a camp body at that point. I'm not sure because I don't know exactly how much they'll value Kessler being a 2019 conditional 7th round pick. I doubt the value's there too much to where a guy could beat him out. I just don't think it'll happen too early unless a guy like Mason that they really like and checks off their boxes falls into their laps or something like that.
Yeah, so that pretty much covered exactly what I was going to ask. As far as like the late round quarterback potential developmental prospect goes. So just give us a prediction. Who do you think that they take at pick 29?
It's still, I'll tell you, being a Jags fan, I'm not used to this. I'm used to a top 5 pick. You've got your 3 or 4 guys there that you're like confident that's going to be the guy. So I'm not used to the idea of saying, oh, what if he's available at our pick? Then we got to take him. It's totally different. I think if it's a guy like Will Hernandez, you absolutely have to pull the trigger. I'd be willing to say if either he or Gesicki are there, that they would end up being the picks, with maybe linebacker being a sleeper pick at that point. And whatever they go out of tight end and offensive line at 29, I think they'll do whatever they didn't go at 29 at 61. So say they take Gesicki at 29, I could see like Frank Ragnow at 61, or if they go Hernandez at 29, maybe Hayden Hurst at 61 if he's there.
Awesome. Excellent insight from Zach Goodall. Zach, where can we find you on Twitter?
You can find me on Twitter at Zach_Goodall. And you can be sure to check out the Locked On Jaguars page at Locked On Jaguars. We got a lot of really good stuff going over on at the website. We've got a prospect fit series that we're trying to pump out. Just get everyone in tune with who seems to be linked to the team and how exactly they would fit immediately as a rookie. So be sure to check that out.
No doubt about it. Be sure to check it out, guys. Great stuff always. Appreciate you joining us, Zach, and we'll talk to you soon, man.
Sounds good. Thank you guys so much.
Absolutely. Appreciate you joining us, Zach. And guys, Cover One, the podcast, is brought to you by First Down Playbook. First Down Playbook is the #1 playbook resource for football coaches with over 30,000 plays. First Down Playbook is a database of youth, high school, and flag football plays, color-coded with coaching points for every position on every play. Check it out today at firstdownplaybook.com. That's First Down Playbook, one place, all the football. Joining us now, Myles Gorham, a contributor to climbingthepocket.com, a very good, insightful Vikings analyst. Myles, how we doing, man?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. We got you on. We want to talk about the Minnesota Vikings, where they pick at 30th overall. Obviously, things have kind of changed from when they were in the NFC title game till now. You don't have the quarterbacks that you had, as far as, no more Case Keenum, no more Sam Bradford, no more Teddy Bridgewater. But things are really looking up for you guys because your defense is fantastic, so much skill there. And that's where I want to start with you guys, regarding kind of the defensive line. You've got Daniel Hunter, Linville Joseph, and now Sheldon Richardson. What are your thoughts on the Richardson signing?
Yeah, I think that one was definitely one of those signings that, we knew that they were going to make a move for a quarterback. We kind of had the idea a week or two beforehand that it was probably going to be, or a good chance it was going to be Kirk Cousins. So you knew they're going to commit some, pretty big money there, but I didn't expect them to make another splash signing, I guess you could say, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I think we were like a lot of the, guys that climb in the pocket and other Vikings fans, we were kind of looking at, what are other options the Vikings could go for D tackle, because we didn't think, a guy like Sheldon Richardson would be available for the team based off the cap and everything like that. But that was probably the most underrated move, I think, in all of the NFL, in my opinion, just in terms of it went under the radar. It's a 1-year deal, but it's the impact he's going to have is That's the one. It's the one position where I think it's really going to bring everything together, because you saw the defensive line wear down toward the end of the season. You had a couple of guys that are kind of playing more snaps than they really should have been, in Tom Johnson and Shamar Stephen down the stretch there. So it was a really good signing, because it's really going to help a guy like Linval Joseph, which he's already an all-pro caliber type of player, Pro Bowl level player, and one of the better guys at his position. So getting a guy like Sheldon Richardson to play next to him, where you can really you have to pick your poison. Do you double team Sheldon, or you double team Linval? And good luck, because whoever you double team, you have to let the other guy go, or guy one-on-one. And I think that's going to be really tough for some teams, because both guys can wreak havoc, especially on third downs. I think being able to have Sheldon Richardson play all three downs is really key, because, like I said before, I didn't really have an every down three tech for the Vikings last season.
Well, and he's going to play alongside Everson Griffin, which is, just as dominant as it gets as far as edge rusher. He's I think, even though he puts up incredible stats, I still think he's one of the most underrated edge rushers in the league. So, your guys' defensive line is looking phenomenal, and really your whole defense, there's so much talent there. I think maybe the guy that sticks out the most as far as what can he bring to the table is Ben Gideon out of Michigan, a guy that, I'm familiar with from watching him in college. Where do you think he kind of goes into year two?
Yeah, I'm really curious about that too. I just think it's really hard for him to kind of find a role, just because of, the two linebackers that the Vikings already have with Anthony Barr and Eric Kendricks. Those guys don't really leave the field. And in today's NFL, you playing against teams like the Detroit Lions and teams that spread it out, like the Packers, and I'm assuming the Bears will do a little bit more of that this season. So you play against teams that spread it out, so you're not really playing in base defense as often as you were, even 5 years ago. So Ben Gideon kind of played, I think, might have been not even 30 snaps a game, 30% of the snaps all season in terms of per game basis. So I think the hard part for him is just finding that opportunity to get more snaps. But when he played pretty well. He was obviously a big upgrade, which is crazy to kind of think about. He's a big upgrade to what Chad Greenway was just 2 years ago, just because Chad Greenway was on the tail end of his career, couldn't really run with tight ends or anything like that. So I really think Ben Gideon could kind of continue to develop and continue to emerge into a role where he's a really good special teams player, but he's also that third linebacker, and he could fill in at the Mike spot if you needed him to. If a guy like Eric Kendricks got hurt, he's tested extremely well at the combine. So I think Gideon and his read and reaction, he's really good, filling gaps and filling the run. So he does a really good job in that sense. So I think he could, fill in at the Mike spot in a pinch if you really needed him to.
Do you think?
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to just say, do you think they potentially target a linebacker with the 30th overall pick at all? Maybe a guy like, Leighton Vander Esch or Rashaan Evans is available. Obviously, those are two very talented players, and I mean, personally, I don't think either one will be there, but do you think if they're there, they take a look at one of them? Because it seems like every year a really nice, solid defensive player falls right into their lap, and they just take them, and they thrive with it. So, I mean, if one of them are there, would you be surprised?
Yeah, that's Zim's MO. He wants to have as much defensive talent as he can, but I don't think it would surprise me, just because both Eric Kendricks and Anthony Barr are free agents after this season, and you have to go with Danielle Hunter and Stephon Diggs. Those two guys are free agents after the season too. So depending on how they feel in terms of re-signing and extending some of those guys, I wouldn't be surprised if they added a linebacker at 30. Do I think that's the route they should go? No, but if, like you said, a guy like Rashaan Evans, for me, I think if he fell there, it'd be really hard to pass up, just because he's a phenomenal linebacker, and I think he's one of those guys that can come in and play right away, which I think would be really hard for this defense, just because you already have three really solid linebackers in place. So it'd be really hard for a guy like a first round pick like that to see the field early, but definitely be one of those guys that they'd be the successor to. Rashaan Evans would be a successor to Eric Kendricks in year two and stuff like that. And Leighton Vander Esch, I'm not the biggest fan of. I think he's athletic, and I think he's a good player. But I don't know if he has some of that aggressiveness that I think Zim likes in his linebackers. So, but I think he's a good player. I just don't know if he'd fit exactly kind of what Zim likes in a linebacker. But like I said before, if one of those guys was there, would not surprise me if that was a potential target.
As far as the Vikings roster goes, in my opinion, it's one of the top rosters in the NFL from top to bottom. And part of that is, like you mentioned, 4 or 5 major players still being on their rookie contracts. So as the years pass and they have to sign those guys to longer term deals, I feel like this draft and probably next year's draft, kind of finding their replacement is going to be, and filling holes is going to be big to keeping them as contenders throughout Kirk Cousins' contract. So as far as their draft goes this year, they have picks 30, 62, 94. They're all in picks in the first 3 rounds. What do you think is their most pressing need? Are they going to look at an interior offensive lineman at some point? And who are some guys on the interior offensive line that you think would fit their system that they should target?
Like you touched on, Brad, I think the interior offensive line probably is the biggest need. They brought back Nick Easton, who was in left guard last season. It's his first season as a guard. He was, primarily a backup, centered swing backup guard, before that. And he played pretty decent. He didn't grade all that well in PFF's grades, but in the screen and run and the screen game, especially in getting out in open space, he was really good. And I think they lost that when he got hurt in the playoffs, or right before the playoffs he got hurt, and they lost a lot of that. So they brought him back, and I think he's a solid option at left guard, and wouldn't surprise me if he was the starter this season. So their biggest need would be on the right side, right guard. I think because they lost Joe Berger, who just retired. They've talked about moving the right tackle Mike Remmers into right guard. But based off of kind of the moves they've made in free agency, they haven't really, they added Tom Compton. And they brought in Josh Andrews from the Eagles. He's on the Eagles practice squad. So they brought in a couple, lower level guys who are depth pieces, but they didn't really bring anybody to kind of fortify the right side of the line. And based off the way the draft is, I don't see any of these offensive tackles coming in and starting at right tackle right away, unless a Mike McGlinchey or a Connor Williams fell to 30. But I don't see that happening. So I think they're going to go interior O-line, and I think if they were to pick a guy at 30, you have a few options. I think a guy like James Daniels from Iowa would be a perfect fit. He's 6'3", 306, and I think he's one of those guys like what for the offensive coordinator likes to run, John DeFilippo. They like to get those guys out in space, and they want guys who are athletic. And I think James Daniels is one of those guys who could be really good in that scheme. You talk about a guy like Isaiah Wynn. He's one of those guys that I really have a hard time seeing him fall to 30, just because I think he's one of the better.
I'll stop watching football if that happens.
I know, like it's crazy. His tape is phenomenal, and he's an undersized left tackle, but he could slide in and be a starting left guard from day one, and he could be one of the better left guards in the league in the next couple of years. So I like him a lot. He'd be the ideal fit at 30. Like if he was there, you run to the podium and you don't think back, and you don't look back. But
I run into traffic if that happens.
Right. That's exactly what would happen. I mean, but like another scenario is like Billy Price from Ohio State, just because I know a lot of people talk about the continuity he would have with the Vikings starting center Pat Elflein. So there'd be some good chemistry there. And but he just tore his pec at the combine. So I never really envisioned him in the first round anyways before the injury, but after the injury, I just don't see a team doing it, just because you never know, even if it was a slight tear. Those would probably be the three guys I'd see them targeting in the first round. Will Hernandez too could be there. He's more of a road grader. He's he's definitely more athletic for his size than you'd think he is, but and it'd be hard not to go after a guy like that, but I don't see him. He's one of those guys that I see going to, in the middle of round one. So you never know. But he could definitely be an option at 30. Those are probably the only guys I consider in round one. Otherwise, like I said, I would really like to see this team trade back from 30 and, target guys like Frank Ragnow, who's super athletic. He's a Minnesota guy. Austin Corbett, who I think is being vastly underrated in this draft class. I think he could be a guy that come in and fill in right away. And then Braden Smith is another one of those guys I think could be a day two target for the Vikings. All these guys are, pretty much decently athletic guys that can move and work in space a little bit, which I think is definitely what they're looking for. So that'd be kind of the options I'd see for them at probably pick 30 or, into day two at offensive line.
We've mentioned on the podcast before that Will Hernandez is first team all alleyway.
Yeah.
The guy I'd want to have my back. So I could definitely see him Maybe going, like you said, in the middle of the first round. But if he's there for the Vikings, I think that'd be a huge hit for them as well. But.
Definitely.
Another player I really like as far as the interior offensive line, I don't think he'll be, a discussion in rounds 1, 2, or really even 3, unless it's late round 3, which would be pretty ideal fit for you, is Wyatt Teller. I was a big fan of him in Mobile when I saw him live and everything as far as the practices go. And I thought, even though his tape is a little bit inconsistent and there's things as far as, he plays tight hip, plays a little high, but I think as far as hand placement goes, his aggressiveness, and he's just strong. I mean, he had 30 reps in the bench. I really think Wyatt Teller would be a really good fit for you guys later in the draft if you didn't go interior offensive line. Obviously, Will Hernandez, like Brad just said, makes a lot of sense. Have you had a chance to take a look at Teller at all, and do you think he'd be a fit?
Yeah, I've seen a little bit of his tape. I think overall he'd be a good fit, like you said, as one of those mid-day 3 or like early day three guys. But he's not one of those guys that I expect to come in and be a starter right away, which I think is part of the problem. Is just the fact that like you couldn't go into the draft. The Vikings can't go into this draft and likely can't come away with a non-starter on the interior offensive line just because of who they have currently. I like Wyatt Teller. If you were to grab one guy early and then you wanted to grab another interior guy on day 3, I think he'd be a great fit there. So I like that move, but I don't know if I'd see it as him being the first offensive lineman they take.
So the last person I want to mention and ask you about is Deshaun Hamilton, our boy.
Yeah.
We've had some conversations about Deshaun Hamilton and how we think he's the best route runner in the class and how he's both of our kind of draft crush for the year. So can you just speak on Hamilton? Maybe not necessarily potential fit for the Vikings, though I could see it if they're not planning on bringing back Stephon Diggs, which I think is far fetched. But just talk about what you think about Deshaun Hamilton.
Yeah, I mean, I got into him probably late last year as I was watching some of the Penn State film on Chris Godwin. He kind of flashed, and he's just one of those guys who is just a technician. Everything he does, he's so sound with it. He tested a lot better. He tested a lot better than I kind of expected based off the tape. I didn't think he was slow by any means, but I didn't think he was a high 4.4, low 4.5 guy. It didn't surprise me, I guess, but it was one of those it was a pleasant surprise more than like a major surprise. So I think in terms of his on-field ability and his testing numbers, I expected agility numbers to be pretty kind of where they were and everything like that. But like I said, the straight line speed a little bit better than I expected. I think he gets a lot of grief for some of drops, his hands, but I don't see it as an issue at the next level. I think he's one of those guys. He could you could see him get 100 plus targets in an NFL system just by how often he gets himself open. He can work the outside, he can work the slot. I'd be really curious, and Brad, to get your opinion here too. Curious where you see him playing at the next level, because I know he can play the slot, and I think the slot's an easy position for him because he can make some of these nickel corners and linebackers, and he can make any of those, or safeties, anybody like that. He can kind of make them, put them on skates. But do you kind of see him more of like an X receiver, or do you see him more on the inside?
I definitely think he's a slot receiver just because he almost primarily played at Penn State.
Sure.
And he has the size. He's over 6 feet tall. He's over 200 pounds to maybe move around to the outside. But I think that if he's just kind of a natural slot and be able to get open as an immediate separator, that's probably where I would project him. But yeah, he like I mentioned, he's our guy. He's the guy that we've been calling Deshaun during the whole film.
For sure. Yeah. I mean,
my favorite player probably.
Yeah. I mean, I've been saying it for a while now. I think he's his senior bowl week, down in Mobile, and even his East-West Shrine games and everything like that, like how he performed at that, I think he's really propelled himself into day two. And I think, round 3 is kind of where I expect him to go. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if he was, a top 100 pick, because he's that good in my opinion. I think he's going to come in and be a starting slot receiver, like you said, from day one. And he's going to be one of the better route runners on the team. He can contribute right away. And he could be a wide receiver 3 from day one, in my opinion. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if he was a day 2 pick.
Hamilton at pick 62 of the Vikings confirmed.
That would be insane.
Me, I wouldn't complain about it. I do think that the Vikings do plan on targeting either a move tight end or a receiver at some point, on day 2. That's kind of why I would like to see them trade back from their first pick, just because they don't have a 4th round pick. And I think the the sweet spot of this draft is, between rounds 2 and 4, just where like the meat of the draft is. Because, you don't have a top 10 pick. So, you're at the back end of round 1. So why not go get an extra mid-round pick and go get weapons for your new quarterback? Go get a guy like, I know they've shown a lot of interest for Anthony Miller. Jordan Lasley's been in that conversation. Dante Pettis is another one of those guys. Some of those guys that are, have Antonio Callaway's another one. Guys that have some return ability, as well as, they can get downfield, and they could potentially be a Stephon Diggs replacement or be your wide receiver 3, however you want to do it. But just to add more weapons to this offense. And then I think, they're looking at a move tight end too, which I think this offense really is missing next to Kyle Rudolph, because they have a blocker in David Morgan, who's more of a tight end 3. But if, for some reason, a guy like Dallas Goedert, Mike Gesicki, I'm not the biggest Hayden Hurst fan just mainly because of his age, and he hasn't played that much football. And then you look at like Mark Andrews and Ian Thomas, there's, basically 5 or 6 tight ends that I think they could look to target on day 2 as well. If they don't find that wide receiver they like, go get a guy who could be Kyle Rudolph's eventual replacement and be the move athletic tight end that you need.
Just want to enlighten the listeners, they don't have their 4th round pick because they traded it for Sam Bradford.
Yeah. Which is the tough part. It's hard, a tough pill to swallow. You trade all that draft capital to go get a Sam Bradford and hoping he's going to be there for more than 2 years, but ends up not working out that way.
I mean, I was happy to see it as a Lions fan, but it's all right. You guys are going to take you're going to take Hamilton with pick 62, and he's going to run circles around Tabor in the slot. So I can't wait to watch that.
Yeah, that's true.
Sundays. But as far as the running back position goes, you guys lost Jerick McKinnon. I know you got Dalvin and Latavius Murray. Do you think later, obviously day 3 of the draft, is there a running back potentially that you would like to see them take and potentially maybe take some of the role that Jerick McKinnon was doing as the pass catching back that he was?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think the guy that I would really like to see them kind of look at and target would be more of a Ito Smith from Southern Miss.
Yes.
I think that guy's really good. I think he's extremely underrated. Catch the ball. He's really good in the screen game. I think he's a willing blocker. He's the guy that I would love to see them, target on day 3 and add as your RB3, running back by rotation, committee.
It's crazy. I'm freaking out because I literally have underneath my question Ito Smith, so that's why I'm freaking out. It's like I hit the lottery. You got anything else, Brad?
I do not.
All right. Well, Myles, where can we find you on Twitter?
Yeah, my handle's Myles Gorham.85.
Okay. And all of your work we can see on climbingthepocket.com, correct?
Yeah,
correct?
Yep. Do a lot more podcasts than I do articles on it. But yeah, definitely. You can find all of our work in climbingthepocket.com. We're doing a lot of mini pod series right now, kind of doing our top 5 rankings. So those are just started to come out this today, actually, and they'll be spread out into between now and the draft.
Awesome. Well, Myles, I really appreciate your time, man. Look forward to speaking some trash to you during the season, like always. Take care. Best of luck on soccer tonight, man. And thanks for joining us.
Thanks for putting me on blast, man. I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Have a good one.
All right, and that's everything for episode 57. Be sure to follow Myles and Zach on Twitter, of course. Follow Brad at BradKelly17 on Twitter. Follow me at Russ NFL Draft. Until next time, this is Cover One, the NFL Draft Podcast.